Welcome to the Health Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Jean Armand. The Health Flow Podcast is designed to share healthcare information and experiences that will educate and empower you to make better health decisions. This week, our topic is on diabetes, and I'm so honored to welcome my guest, Angela Blackman. Angela Blackman is a graduate from Seton Hall University. She was an accounting major. She's a Christian wife, mother of three adult daughters. She currently works at the Superior Court of New Jersey in Paterson, New Jersey, and she is the finance division manager. She has held this position for 25 years. Might I add that she is the first African American manager hired in Paterson. And the fun fact about Angela Blackman is that we met at college. She was my freshman year um, roommate, and we have been friends since. So, welcome, Angela. Welcome to the Health Flow Podcast.
Thank you. Hi, Jean.
I'm so honored to have you. So we're going to be talking about diabetes, and just if you want to share something about yourself to the audience that I haven't mentioned, please go ahead.
Other than everything you already said, I do have a real love for God and I love to read. That is my favorite thing to do.
Okay, wonderful. I'm working on reading, um, making that more of a passion for myself too. Okay, so I have Angela on the podcast before today because her daughter um, has type 1 diabetes. And just before we get into that, I just want to explain that there are several types of diabetes. The first one being type 1, type 2, and also gestational diabetes. And type 1 diabetes is really an autoimmune reaction. It means that your body attacks itself and it destroys the beta cells in your pancreas, and that's where insulin is made. Some people have the gene that make them more likely to develop type 1 diabetes, or sometime in life they may have been exposed to a virus that may have played a role in developing type 1 diabetes. Your diet and lifestyle habit does not cause type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes usually is diagnosed in children, teens, and young adult, but it really can develop at any age. So, Angie, tell us about your daughter and how she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Okay, so Ebony was 6 years old when she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. From my understanding, is her pancreas does not produce insulin.
Right.
Um, so some of the signs that she exhibited was she was very lethargic. She hardly would eat. She stayed thirsty all the time, urinated a lot, and lost weight rather quickly. So
So,
at the point that we took her to the hospital, she had gotten to the point where she was really just laying around, not really moving, not walking. We actually had to carry her into ER when we went. And when we got there, her blood sugar was over 500.
wow. So up until six, from infancy to 6 years old, she was healthy as far as you knew, had her all her follow-ups with the pediatrician, and there were no other indications that she was diabetic.
Not at all.
Okay. All right. And Angela mentioned about the insulin, and I just want to explain to everyone that insulin is a hormone that makes the blood sugar in our that makes the blood sugar in our bodies. It makes the blood sugar enter the cells so that we can use that for energy. So without insulin, the blood sugar then just builds up really in your bloodstream, and that's when all the problems um, occur. So people with type 1 diabetes, they don't make insulin at all or enough. So let's just want to, clear that with everyone. So now let's continue on with Ebony. So she at 6 years old, she's diagnosed. And how did that impact your home life?
Oh my goodness, it was mm, very traumatic in the beginning because she's a 6-year old and you go to the hospital and they're trying to show you how to administer her insulin, give her shots, and then so many different people coming to you at the same time. You have a nutritionist coming, you have the diabetic doctor, you have social workers. So it was just a time of I was a lot of confusion, I would say. um, and then once she got out of the hospital and we got home, trying to ensure that I knew how to count her her intake of protein
Calories.
is, yeah,
Mm.
protein and the one that creates sugar. Can't think right now, but anyway, so,
Carbs,
yeah, we had to
carbohydrates.
count,
Mhm.
right, count carbohydrates, and just trying to make sure that you count them correctly. Had to measure food, and then of course I didn't want to have her feel that she wasn't able to eat what everybody else can eat. So, you didn't want to make her a separate meal than everybody else. So if I had rice, I wanted to give her rice and then just be able to count the carbs and give her the correct amount of insulin. So it was a lot of work. And for her, at 6 years old, if there's a birthday party and I'm telling her she can only have a little small piece of cake because she's diabetic, and, it became a big thing for her.
Right. And was she the only child in the home at this time?
No, she had an older sister.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Actually, older sister and younger sister. Taya was like maybe one, and
Oh,
Adria was 5. Yeah,
all right. So, but Ebony is the oldest one. So she had
that
two younger siblings at home while you're trying to, manage her. So I'm sure a lot of your time and effort had to go into, helping her.
yes. I did. A lot of my time went into Ebony, and just trying to ensure that her food was correct, her insulin, and just making sure she was taken care of. So you know, Adria probably got slighted a little bit because I had to put a lot of attention on Ebony.
Okay, I'm sure that had to be difficult. So, what kind of support did you get from the medical community, from your doctor, the social work, nutritionist? How was that experience?
In the beginning, I wind up changing hospitals because the hospital that I was at, I felt that the diabetic doctor that they gave me, that she wasn't very empathetic. So, you know, when she was trying to show me how to do shots and they were doing it in an orange or whatever, and I would ask questions, she was very impatient. She always sighed and it was like I was creating a problem for her.
Right.
So I was talking to some people and they directed me to go to Hackensack Hospital, which is a teaching hospital, and I wound up going there. Dr. Eisenberg was very good at really calming my nerves, letting me know I was doing what I need to do correctly,
Right.
and the social worker with Ebony, talking her through what she was going through, the nutritionist, helping me read boxes and understanding carb intake and all that, and what foods, she could have more of as opposed to, trying to cut down on the carbs. Not to say you have to cut carbs out because you can have carbs as long as you cover with insulin. So just trying to help me measure carbohydrates, how much rice constituted 15, whatever units of insulin. So um, they were very much more helpful than the first hospital I was at.
Yeah. I'm always a proponent of really going where you're comfortable, and where people are patient with you. Even for me as a healthcare provider, that would have been challenging for me because so many things that you take, for granted every day and you just grab and you eat, you're this is totally new for you. So I'm glad that you were able to just, not just stick with them because that's all, that's what you knew, but you knew well enough to say, hey, they're not working for me. I'm willing. I'm a participating mother, so let me just go to someone else that can really, help me.
Right. And it would have been easy for me to stay with the first doctor because they were right here in Patterson. So,
Mhm.
I changed doctors and I had to go to Hackensack, which is like 20 minutes away. But, I could have been, it could have been more convenient by being in Patterson. But again, like I said, I wasn't comfortable with the care that I was receiving or um, I don't know, she just wasn't patient.
Okay. So, did everyone in the family pitch in with helping Ebony, with her diet and her checking her finger sticks and
Yeah, even Adria, who was a year younger, she would try to help her. Terrence, my husband, he wasn't really good at giving her needle, but if he had to, he would. It was really more so on me. Her finger sticks in the beginning, it was, she cried a lot, but I guess once you get used to it, she didn't anymore. So for the first couple of years, it was more hard because I was the one administering the shots until I started teaching her how to do it herself.
that's what I was going to ask is at what age did she did you start immediately at 6 trying to teach her how to do it, or did you just more or less just, at 6 she may not want to have any parts of it. You just did it because you knew that's what she needed, and then, gradually teach her. Like when was she, start being independent with checking her own blood sugar, giving her own insulin?
I mean, she was more independent with checking her own blood sugar, probably when she was from 6. I would just let her do it, but giving her own shot, I didn't. She didn't start giving her own shot until she probably was like 9 or 10.
Okay. And at that time they never introduced the insulin pump?
Well, Ebony blood sugars were always high, so the doctor never wanted to put her on a pump until we could regulate her blood sugars. To find out many years later that she was just one of those people that always has high blood sugars. So we did this test where they put this machine on her for 72 hours, and it tracked her blood sugars, and I had to record everything she ate and how much insulin I gave her, and then take it back to the doctor, and they took off the machine and they read it, and her sugars were over 300. So she's always been a person that has had very high blood sugars, no matter how much insulin they've given. They've changed the basal, the bolus. It's been all over the place. So
It was harder for her to control.
yes. Mm.
Wow. Did the doctors have any explanation for that? Was it because, she's a growing child or
They just said some people just tend to have very high blood sugars that can't be controlled.
yeah. Wow. What are some of the challenges you've faced with having a child with type 1 diabetes?
I think some of the challenge, well, one of the biggest challenges was just trying to understand the whole insulin thing. I just mentioned basal and bolus. Basal, long acting, the one that stays in your body for 24 hours, as opposed to bolus, which is fast acting, which we gave her as she ate her food. So whenever she would eat, she had to take a bolus, and then usually basal was supposed to be 24 hours. But again, because Ebony's blood sugars were so high, I had to start giving her it in the morning and at night, so 12 hours apart, trying to keep her blood sugars, at a lower level. So that was challenging, just trying to understand just the different types of insulin and what they did for her. And then
Right.
also diet, trying to just cook. What am I going to cook? What am I going to give her? Because again, I didn't want to do separate meals. I wanted her not to feel that she was different, because she
Right.
had diabetes. So that was challenging, trying to figure out what we were going to eat and, you know, a lot of times she would still be hungry and want more, and I was always not knowing, should I give her more rice or pasta or not, because I already gave her insulin. So that was very challenging, and just trying to get her on board as she got older to be able to take her own insulin. And what I found as she became like in her like 12, 13, she was embarrassed about being diabetic. So she would hide that she was diabetic, and she would eat what she knew she wasn't supposed to um, with her friends and not take insulin, or try to go into the bathroom, which we know is full of germs, where I always told her not to do that. And, try to sneak and take her insulin because she didn't want her friends to know she was diabetic. So that was
Yeah.
really challenging.
Did she receive any counseling on how to deal with it? Was there any, at especially during the teenage years when that's the time, and you can let me know if you found that experience during the teenage years is really one of the most difficult time for people with diabetes type
Mm-hmm.
1, because there's so much going on, and like you said, they want to be in the in crowd, they want to be normal, do normal things. This is like a really challenging time for a teenager, period, and on top of that you're dealing with diabetes.
That is correct. Her teenage years were very rough. Um, she, like I said, she was embarrassed and she didn't want her friends to know she was diabetic. But yes, she did go to counseling. They had groups. I was part of the board at Hackensack Hospital for children that had, different types of, I don't want to say diseases because it wasn't a disease, but sicknesses or illnesses. So, I was always, like I said, I'm always reading, so I always wanted to keep up on what was going on. So I joined the board, and then the meetings were the same night as the teens group sessions. So she went to group, and then she had private meetings with her social worker. But Ebony just didn't want to admit that she was diabetic. We would even try drastic things like taking her to the hospital to see somebody that got their leg cut off because they were diabetic or whatever. And her response would be, "Oh, they're old. That's not going to happen to me." So, she was just, I don't know, didn't want to admit that that's what she had.
Right, denial. When did
Mhm.
she finally admit it, or was able to care for herself, for her diabetes, I should say?
She was taking care, caring for her diabetes. May not have been doing it correctly as a teen, but I guess when she got into college, a lot I would get calls a lot that she was in emergency because she either had a low blood sugar or her sugars were very high, and you know, Ebony didn't even tell her roommate that she was diabetic. So when she first had her first seizure, the girl didn't know to help her or give her 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 what, I forget what it's called, the
The
thing that
glucose,
raise your blood sugar, the little red.
the
Um,
glucose
yeah,
tab.
yeah. Well, she had the glucagon.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so she didn't even know Ebony was diabetic. The girl got so scared that she actually moved out of rooming with Ebony. So, and then the school called me because they were concerned about her having these low sugars and not having a roommate, and her not sharing with the roommate. But I guess as she got a little bit older in her sophomore junior year, she became a little bit more responsible. But even with that, like, she didn't want to go and be put on the list, the ADA list for accommodations. She just didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah, well, that was her way of dealing it. In the meantime, just really doing more harm than good, to herself. How is she doing right now?
Still having issues. Now she has neuropathy, and she has some other related issues. She has high blood pressure, so she's on a lot of medication. Ebony still doesn't eat right. She feels that the doctor told her she could eat anything she wants as long as she covers herself with insulin. So that's the mindset that she has, that she could eat whatever she wants, and that's what she does.
Right. And there, you mentioned that she has neuropathy, and I just this is a perfect time to just talk about some of the complications of ongoing high blood sugar. Some of the number one complication for diabetics is really heart disease. Is the number one leading is the leading cause of death among diabetics. The high blood sugar level just also damage our kidneys, the blood
Mhm.
vessels in our kidneys, which also then decrease the ability for our kidneys to filter waste. Then you're talking about the nerve damage, like you said. There's neuropathy, which it the high sugar damage your nerves, and nerves are like all over our bodies. That's where, deafness come because you have nerve in your ears, your feet, that pain that they have, and the loss of sensation. That's what leads to people having their limbs cut off because they get really bad infections, stub their toes, and don't even realize it. I mean, your eyes, the high blood sugar levels damage the small blood vessels in your retina. All this can lead to, they call it diabetic retinopathy, but that can lead to blindness. It's just so many things. If the sugar is not controlled, it just wreaks havoc on your body. It's
Well, one is a lot of the things you just said, Ebony has. So Ebony has already experienced the blood vessels bursting in her eyes, where she was blind in one eye. She had to get shots in her eyes. The needles, as you may know, are very long. She was very scared. So they did a series of the left eye because that was the worst one first, and she had like 3 or 4 series of shots in that eye, and then she had to go to the right eye, and I think she had 2 or 3 shots in the right eye. Um, After that, I said, she had a neuropathy. Her feet burn if she's on her feet for a long period of time. They're now watching her kidney levels because she had blood in her urine, so they watch her levels for her kidneys, as well as she has an irregular heartbeat. So she's always saying that her heart is racing, it's beating very fast, so she has a heart murmur. So she's experiencing a lot of the symptoms because she did not take care of her diabetes as she should have, in her teenage and now adult years.
right. And I do understand. I mean, there comes a point, if we can keep them small and just, we do all the work, we can control things better. And even then, she was just someone who was difficult to control, even at best, with all the work you were doing. And now, at some point, we have to let them go to, we can't be there 24/7.
Yeah,
Can't
it's
be.
with the nurses at school. The nurses would have her come into the office to take her blood sugar and her insulin, or before lunch or whatever. And they would then tell me that they would see her with certain things that she shouldn't have, kind of thing. Cookies or whatever, because she just never wanted to admit that she was diabetic, and she wanted to eat what she saw her friends eating. So, she would sneak stuff. I would go in the basement and I would find, cans of peaches, or juice or whatever, soda, things that she shouldn't have. We would make sure she had diet soda, things that didn't have a lot of sugar. She didn't want that. So I would find empty cans in the basement when she was supposed to be washing clothes that she didn't snuck and drank. So you can
Yeah.
only do what you can do.
It's hard. It's a hard one. If anything, what would you like to share with our audience about dealing with type child with type 1 diabetes?
um I think that you know you should try to learn as much as you can. I did a lot of reading and research, and try to get your child the help that you can give them, as far as sitting with the nutritionist. Me and Ebony went to 1,000 of nutritionists trying to uh, for her to be able on her own to be able to count carbs and know the correct amount of insulin to give. We went away from the insulin jars to the insulin pens because it was, a little bit more comfortable for her to carry. Didn't have to keep it cold. Um, so just trying to make sure that the child is whole, to talk about the feelings that they're experiencing. We talk about a lot about her being with her friends and how she felt that she was different because she couldn't eat certain things, like if they were going for pizza. Ebony was also lactose intolerant, so I understand why she would want pizza anyway, knowing it would make her stomach hurt. But she just felt that she was different. So that as much as you can try to let them see that, it's just they have a illness and is no different than somebody else having a cold, or theirs is a little bit longer long term,
Right.
but it's something that you can you can maintain if you do the things that are right. So the earlier you can get that in their head, the better,
Right.
because maybe I did it for her too long, and by the time that I started her to do it on her own, I don't know. You think about maybe you did things wrong or whatever. I did the best that I could do it with the situation that I had at the time. Um, but just trying to keep a line of communication open, and if they won't talk to you, getting them professional help. I had her going to social workers, psychologists, so she can speak to other people. I had her going to teen groups and groups so she could see that she wasn't the only person that had this illness, that it was other people just like her. And once she went to high school, there was another girl that was diabetic, so they kind of gelled. So when they see that it's somebody else other than themselves and they're not alone, I think that helps the situation. So, I mean, as much as you can, you know, talk, talk, talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a wonderful job, Angie. I know you personally, and I know you did a good job, but there's only but so much we can do. I know even as a healthcare provider, diabetes is one of those things that's hard for us to see people go through
Mm-hmm.
because you know that they could be successful, but they've got to be committed to the plan.
Yep.
It's tiring and it's disheartening to see really people destroying their health in front of you. It's repeated visits to the hospital, and you know that it's one, they're not eating what they're supposed to, then they're not even checking blood sugars, not taking the medicine, not getting exercise. So it's one thing if if you're diagnosed with um I don't know, say you're an asthmatic,
Right.
and your asthma come when your asthma comes on, sometimes that's out of your control. It could be just environment or whatever your trigger is. But if you take the medicine, it it relieve your symptoms and you're good, and you don't have to take the medicine most of the time in between episodes unless you're just taking stuff from maintenance. But with diabetes is different because it's every day, all day. There's never any let up. And the person with the diabetes is the one with the control. If they don't buy into take care of themselves, nothing, not what their family want from them, what any doctor or nurse wish and hope for them. It's disheartening to see people, that this thing exists, but if they really just take the time to follow, to take care of themselves the way they're taught to, then they can live healthier and longer lives. So it is very I'm passionate about it because I've seen it's like many episodes of repeated visits to the hospital. This time that person is blind, the next time they're losing a leg, and it's like, it's because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're just not.
Yeah. And that's pretty much with Ebony. She's just not doing what she's supposed to do. So, it is very disheartening. As a kid, you can talk to them and, kind of have a little bit more control. But as they become adults, she just called me. She was just in the hospital over the weekend. Said her, she was stressing. Her heart was beating really fast. Her stomach was hurting. She also had celiac disease. That her
Wow.
stomach was bothering her, and when she went into the hospital, they were more concerned about the irregular heartbeat because her heart was racing so fast. Um, so she was there for a couple of days before they released her. But it's all because she didn't take care of herself, you know, over the years. So now she's starting to have a lot of the effects of all those high blood sugars for so
Yeah.
long.
How old is Ebony now?
She'll be 25 next month.
Yeah. And I mean, the good note for her, she is a college graduate. So, we are proud of her for that.
Very.
Just
Mm-hmm.
she's done positive things and she has the ability to, but until I just pray that it's not too late before something in her says, you know what, I'm worth it and I'm going to take the very best care of myself so that I can live a better life. That's what I'm hoping for her. Thank you so much. And in the second part of this, I'll talk about type 2 diabetes. Angela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. God bless.
Are you thinking about starting your own podcast? If so, Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, Anchor is free. Anchor has all the creation tools that allow you to record your podcast and edit it right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
So, welcome to part 2 of diabetes at the Health Flow podcast. In part 1, we talked about type 1 diabetes. Now I'll talk about the other 2 types of diabetes. Well, maybe 3. So there's gestational diabetes, and that's having diabetes during pregnancy. Women are tested around between weeks 24 and 28. A pregnant woman will have the glucose tolerance test. Usually after her pregnancy is completed, most women do go back to being non-diabetic. Then there's prediabetes. So in prediabetes, your blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but they're not high enough for you to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And just to remind you that normal blood sugar usually range between 80 to 100. As I stated before, insulin is a hormone that's produced by our pancreas, and the insulin allows blood sugar to enter in our cells and become used for energy. In prediabetes, the cells in our body don't react normally to insulin. The pancreas keeps on making more insulin, trying to get the cells to respond and let the blood sugar get into the cells. As time goes, the pancreas can't keep up, and then our blood sugar level rises, and you can end up being a type 2 diabetic unless you're able to halt that whole episode. Risk factors for prediabetes some of them are being overweight, those who are 45 years and older, having a close sibling with type 2 diabetes, such as your parent or brother or sister, not being physically active. And when I say physically active, I hear this a lot. People say, oh, my work requires a lot of physical activity. No, your body has become accustomed to that. If you've been doing it for many years at work, that doesn't count. Physical activity, planned physical activity, no less than 3 times per week. Really, it should be more than that. Having a history of gestational diabetes is also a risk factor, and women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. The people that are at high risk for prediabetes are African Americans, Hispanic and Latino Americans, Asian Americans, American Indians, Pacific Islanders. This ethnic group are all at higher risk for diabetes. If you are a pre-diabetic, you can really do something about this. It doesn't have to progress into you becoming pre-diabetes. It doesn't have to progress into you having type 2 diabetes. Losing the weight if you're overweight, getting regular exercise are some things that can just, prevent you from moving on to type 2 diabetes. Now let's talk about type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes usually occur over age 45, but actually because of increasing obesity in children, teens, and young adults, we're seeing more of that group developing type 2 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes, our cells do not respond to insulin like they should, and they become actually insulin resistant. In type 2 diabetes, symptoms can really develop over years and go unnoticed. So that's why it's important to have your checkup done at the doctor, because if you're not having symptoms, you can become a type 2 diabetes and not even be aware of it. When you were in the pre-diabetic phase, if someone had brought it to your attention, hey, your blood sugar on each visit is well over 100, you need to change some things. You need to lose weight, watch your diet, start exercising. That's when you can halt it right there. But when we don't have regular checkups, you progress from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes without even knowing. And remember, because of this, let's go back and talk about your pancreas. In type 2 diabetes, your pancreas is working hard to produce more insulin, but eventually it just cannot keep up with it. And then that's when your blood sugar level rises. So they're not in the cell because you need insulin to put the sugar into the cell and out of your bloodstream. We talk about high levels of blood sugar damages blood vessels. Those are blood vessels in your heart, blood vessels in your eyes. Remember I mentioned diabetic retinopathy, that all that can lead to vision blindness, and the damage that it does on the blood vessels in your kidneys. So it should not be ignored. Diabetes is unique in the way is that the individual is in control. It is not something where the healthcare provider is the one that's doing all the controlling. No, the person, if you're diagnosed with diabetes, it is at utmost importance for you to take control.
Diabetes is manageable, but it takes commitment by you. Diabetes does not have to end up with all the myriad of complications that we see today, but you have to be able to play a role and take over and really take charge. No, the doctor doesn't go home with you. Nobody is watching what you're eating. Nobody is monitoring your exercise. So this is an opportunity for you really to halt any complications. Managing your type 2 diabetes means that you have to eat healthy. You have to plan physical activity at least 3 times a week. If you're prescribed insulin, you've got to take the insulin. If you're being treated with anti-diabetic medicines, which are pills, you have to take them. You should be checking your blood sugar levels regularly. It's also important for diabetics to make sure that they're keeping their blood sugar and cholesterol under control. You don't need 2 things to damage your heart and kidneys. So we already know that high blood pressure can wreak havoc on your kidneys. But can you imagine having high blood pressure and uncontrolled diabetes? That's a double whammy, setting you up for kidney failure, setting you up for end-stage renal disease where you may need dialysis or a new kidney. And also, let's go back to diabetic medications. If you're taking a certain medication that was prescribed by your doctor, sometimes this is trial and error because no 2 human beings are the same and they may respond differently. If you're not tolerating a medication that you're given, talk to your healthcare provider so that adjustments can be made. Because if you just decide, oh, I don't like the way this medicine makes me feel, or it's not working, it's doing such and such to me, and you don't take the medicine, we go right back. Your blood sugar levels are high. That means that the blood vessels in your heart, your eyes, and your kidneys are potentially being damaged and setting you up for serious complication. So it doesn't hurt the healthcare provider if you don't take your medicine. You are in control. You have to speak up and fight for a healthier life. You'll need more frequent appointments. And also, a thing that we have to understand is as a diabetic, you should make sure that you know what type of things you can get, what type of assistance you can get from your healthcare, from your insurance to prevent complications of diabetes, such as, so to understand this, the healthcare insurance, they would rather pay for prevention than to pay for complications. Complications cost more. They will help with gym memberships. Maybe you need a nutritionist or a diabetic educator. Those are resources that most health insurance plan will avail to their customers because it's going to prevent complications. It costs less to pay for those things than to pay for you to get a kidney transplant or to pay for you to get dialysis. So just know that you should take advantage of all those programs. Just don't be afraid to ask for help. Get your regular checkups. Take your medications as prescribed. If you're not tolerating medications, make sure you talk to your doctor about it. Check your blood sugar. Keep a record of it
Know what your triggers are. Know what things cause your blood sugar to rise. Don't forget that stress, any type of stress, can also increase your blood sugar. You should be exercising regularly. You should be getting your eyes checked. You should be seeing a podiatrist for your foot exams. Um, all these things are just ways that you could prevent complications from the type 2 diabetes. I hope this is helpful. Diabetes, I mean, it's complicated, but it really is not. Initially, it may seem overwhelming, but you've got to get your knowledge, get the help. Don't stop asking questions. You may need help as far as with your getting a nutritionist to help you with meal planning. Those things don't just come, like you're diagnosed with diabetes. Today, you have to get to the process that, denial is only going to hurt you. You have to you have to have acceptance. You're accepting that you're diabetic and you take action, because having diabetes does not mean that you are sentenced to this kind of lifestyle. You can have a healthy life and you do not have to lead to all the myriad of complications that we see in healthcare: the loss of limbs, the blindness, the constant pain from neuropathy, the heart attacks, the kidney disease. But you have to take control. No one's going to control it for you. You're going to be your best advocate if you have diabetes. Know your family history. Over and over again, we keep on coming up to the same thing. Know your history so you can fight against risk factors. In the show notes, there's an action sheet from the CDC that I thought was very helpful, and I'll make sure I list the article that they have, and also a sheet that give you the normal values. I know I didn't mention the hemoglobin A1C, but that's also a blood test that's done, and what it does is it gives your provider a snapshot of what your blood sugar been running like the past 3 to 6 months. So, some people, they know they're going into the doctor next week, and then they're really good with now eating what they should, but you can't cheat with this test because it actually shows what you were doing like within the last 3 months. So thank you. I hope you find this information helpful, and thank you for listening to the Health Flow podcast. Thank you for listening to the Health Flow podcast. I hope you found this session informative. Email topics of interest or questions to the Health Flow podcast at gmail.com. Follow me on IG at the Health Flow podcast. Like us on Facebook at the Health Flow. You can also leave a voice message. Hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating. Until next time, have healthy thoughts and do healthy things.